Right. So we were holding, as far as I remember, I think we're even maybe a little bit further, but I think this is a place where we can come in. We began the new Hemshech of Shavuos, Tov Reish Ayin Daled, and we completed the first Maimah. That we completed. And we began and we got down towards the end of the first os in that Maimah, Omed Tov Ayin. In other words, Tov Samach Tes, going over on the Tov Ayin. That's approximately where we're holding. Yesh Lema that we even got a little bit further into Tov Ayin Aleph, but that'll be a point where we can come in. So we were talking Baklau about the Ayin van Reimamus, about the concept of the Ayin Reimamus in Elakus Lamaila and in the Ayin of the Hevdel bein Toihu Latikon. The Nakuda being that the Habi Makim is it's Mavoa, as it were, the Ayin or the Chsaron or the Koyach in the spheres of Toihu was Daki the Reimamas. And since each one was in a state of Reimamas and Keser Liachme, and therefore it wasn't able to be Seivel, the Matthias Zulos. Since it wasn't able to be Seivel, the Matthias Zulos, therefore there was the what you might call the Snagshus or the Yerida Alidei Shvira, from one Matthias, from one sphere to the other. So the kasha was that we began this Maimah, we also hinted at it in the stuff of the previous Maimah, that l'chayra, the Ayin van Reimamus, if we take it in the Temasa Bio, then the shleimus of the concept of Reimamus means that the Makablim, Legavi the Marumam, have no error klau whatsoever. And he's not just marumam mizay be even show error. In other words, that he's a godel ha'erach and they're a cotton ha'erach, which would mean that there's still some sort of error. But the Amitius Reimamus, he is ein areich havdalah gemura from all the Makablim, and therefore all the Makablim be'efen shove umashve have no error regarding the marumam. Yemot, but even because we have a cloud that Amarumim is Nimshech Ela Shofel, despite his Reimamus, despite his Havdalah, Gemura, from all the Makablim, he's able to be Nimshech of Mesachik, would say. And they stand in a Bittel Gomo, Lagabe, even Bittel called Metziusam. Therefore, since they're Bittel called Metziusam, they're a Kli to his Reimamus. And therefore he's able to be Misachadita. That's the Ayin and Reimamus. As if that's the case, how does it fit with Toyo? We said the spheres were Ayin for Reimamus, as if Amiti is in Reimamus, if we come to do Ayin for in other words, that they weren't able to be savels as in other words, that each one had an individual Reimamus, and that Reimamus tended to clash and cause Ayin van what you might call shvira or heder actors beineihem. It's a shirish kol Yeridus on the tutus, kol nefila in the tutus namt van der. The Rebbe said how does that pass with the Amiti Sinner van Reimamus? We have to say that there's kilu another Indian in Reimamus, which is not a Reimamus Amiti. In other words, what you might call a Reimamus Agemachta. How do you call it? a reimamus which is not emes reimamus, and it's a inyan where the person feels, or the marumam, let's put it this way, feels his reimamus. In other words, that he mitzad inyan is murgish biatzmei beinan a reimamus, then he literally forces the reimamus after makabel. Now, Mamera is where he got another individual, another entity, which also feels that type of reimamus, then they can't be seivel, and they're a stira one to the other, and the Matthias of them is seivel, the Matthias from them. In other words, where it's not an amiti sinyan from reimamus, you don't really have a makabel. You don't really have makablim. You have nimsholim, people that are being ruled over, right? Mumusholim, I don't know how to use the expression. In other words, you have Ayin what's called memshola. Or you don't have the amiti sinyan from malucha. For the emzin from malucha is that the melech is marumam be'etzem inyana, as if it's brought down Gabi Shol that he was shichmoi olamayla mikoloam, that he was marumam be'etzem mahusay, so that even the chitzenius amidas shaloi, what that's in from Shechem, were ein arech legavi the shari ha'am. I feel legavi the moichen haki alienim, or the kochas haki lailim, the shari ha'am. They weren't even be'erech legavi chitzenius midesa. What is it the in from reimus atzmiyas? And Mela does it the amiti sin from reimus. I shake into reimus from Tayu was a reimus b'derach murgash, erevo. It's a reimus which mitzad hagoshes malosei alazulos. If the other one doesn't makabel his mila, they're not aware of it, then a pagia and a snatches one to the other. That was better than a kuda that we were getting at. And the Rebbe was medactic to bring out, or that whole concept of reimamus, what he called the inifan reimamus atzmi, a reimamus mitzad the very etzem. Now that's not a reimamus hamayla, even though when we bring that dogma from Shaul, when we say that he was afilu mitzad chitzenis medesav, he was ein arech like avishar ha'am, then that would tend to indicate he's got milas in his govis, that the milas should be the milas that other people who were the subjects had. So that's not really the pshat. The emphasis of pshat is that reimamus amitius is a reimamus atzmius misug zeh, that it's ein arech, and all the makablim b'shavah umashve in the innen from bitulam hagomo v'heder tfisas mochim shalem gemura legavi the maruma. And so therefore that's what we call reimamus atzmius. Reimamus atzmius is the movement that the marumam is marumam kol kach, that it's not because of his mila, he's just legamri mechutz legidrom klau uklau. And it's not shy to say that he's got himself a higher mile, and that mile is ain't originally the mile of ploying, or feel I'll be ploying. And that's what we have to be careful to be medactic. And therefore, we'll read the kitzur on page Tof Ayin, and that'll help us to move into the coming chapter. So he says, "V'hinei masha azulos nira l'matzias." In other words, when in reimamus bilti amitias, the other entity seems to be a Matthias, and therefore it gets in the way of the Matthias of the marumam. So the Rebbe said it's not mitzad the fact that he is a Matthias, and his Matthias is somehow or another disturbing the Matthias of the marumam. Sharei keinu gam b'tikun. The fact that there can be makablim, what they do have a alpi amitius atoira, they do have some sort of a Matthias, then that's a fact in all the madregas. The miyat simsum who in a Matthias, gam lifnei Atzilus. Even Lamaila me Atzilus, there are certain inyanim which al pi amitius Ayin, they call a Matzias kol shehi. V'kol shein b'chinas oilus v'keilim d'Atzilus. V'chitzenius amidas, heim b'chinas is pilot. Een van is pilot. And we mentioned over there in that chapter the Inen van Yedea Yadua. What over there the Rabbi told Bekitza, Nimrat, with a famous shal which occurs in Torah and Pasha Vayera, and it's brought down in many Mekaimis, and there's a famous Sikha from the Rabbi in Pasha Lechlecha in Chelekei about the whole Inen of Yedea versus Bechira, what the Rambam brings in Ilchus Tshuva, Perikei. It's a famous classical shaila, that if the Eibusha knows everything, then how come there's Bechira? Isn't it?
I'm trying to record this song. It's for the shield.
Huh?
I'm trying to record this.
You're trying to put a call?
I'm trying to record the shield.
Oh, I see. Right. Fair enough. Isn't it, Mela? The Union, so the Union is in law Madregas, but that's already the Union from the Chitzenius at the Midas of Atzilus. There's Kavayohu Yodea, that the Eivus Kilo learns and knows about what's going on, and that has an effect on a certain Kilo is pilot, like that level of Elikus Hamatzumtzum. Over the Ine van Elikus Shalamayla me Atzimtzum, and Amitis Elikus of what's called Yodua. Everything is known to him in an even for Makif. This is well known in Mavua Bahavi Makim Sensitive. So the Rebbe said, those two levels where it's already come down, but even because they're the Chaya, but even to talk about our Inin of Matthias, that's already the Inin from Yodea. There we say that Elikus Kilo Yodea. V'hila Yodua, that's the Inin of Elikus Lamaila, and Dorit, there's not Chait the whole Inin of Bechira, but Adarabba, there he knows, but he knows in an even from how do you call it, Lamaila Legamre, me, Chiluchi Madregas and Chiluchi Azman. Rach lifnei Hatzimtzum, Gam b'chinas Hashora b'koyach, Eina b'chinas Matzias. It's only before the Tzimtzum, even a thing which talks about Hashora, even a level where we talk about that we're looking outwards, as it were, and we're being Mashaya, the Madregas, which are later going to be, although it's not Eina for Matzias. Amamera, says the Rebbe, it's true that there is a Inen for Matzias. V'yesh b'chinas reimamas betikun b'chinas hakesa. And he said, Gam malchus b'chinas reimamas, u'machaya b'chinas hamatzias debi. So we see that the Inen from Emerson reimamas out is mitzad tikun. It's not a steer of the fact that the Makablim do have a certain gather of Matzias, and it's not mafriya to the Inen hareimamas. And it doesn't cause a shvira, it doesn't cause any. So he said, Racha Siba, what the Inen of the Zulus is near the Matzias, and that becomes a Inen of a stira, a problem. He said, the Racha Siba hi masha marumam u Matzias bi atzmai. That's the whole Nikud. In other words, why is the fact that there may be a gather of Matzias in Azulus, which can be considered a disturbance, and an Inen which is mavalable, the marumam, or that is only when he's a marumam, but even so, Matzias, his reimam is gufa is Inen for Matzias. And remember, since his reimam is even so Matzias, it's not a reimam which is legam removed from the Makabri Kishkamein between the Matzias. Just that he's, as it were, he's forcefully elevated himself into a Madrega, where he's higher than them, or at least Lafi. Hargashosai, and Mamela, his Matthias and their Matthias can't come to terms. Therefore, the Yesh, Harema Masusha Maruma, Shemaruimim Atmei. Due to the fact that he makes himself Maruma, is Vialke, called over Tefus Mokim Matthias. Rakshema Vateloi say he tries to be Mavatal all the other Inyanim but they are teifus Matthias. So here we see the mitzad the reimamus amitius, there can be a dog which is Matthias, the lom of albo, alpitora kantana things got a Matthias. Aber mitzad reimamus amitius, das ist nicht mehr albo. Aber reimamus, which is befinas asui, and it's a Indian of Matthias, be'etzem reimamus atzmei. Therefore everything, and here we see, apart from being a Matthias, it's also even a what? It's nearer b'pchinas Matthias. It appears to be everything, it looks to be, as it were, more of a Matthias and is teifus mokim more than what it really needs to be. Because there can be such a thing as a maruma, and the Matthias are not available him. It follows where the Reimamus is a Murugish Biatzme, that Kilu creates a problem in the etzem fact that there's a Matthias, and that Matthias becomes a Dor Kilu near a Teifes. Rakshim Avatlo, the whole time he's busy pushing down his potential opponent. He's all the time being Mavatlo there. Ubchinas Reimamus Atzmi. Shezehu loy b'chinas Matthias bi'atzmei klal, ein azulus nira Matthias klal, u'kaloi mami. Obviously we're talking about Reimamus, which is mitad verietem. There he said he's not in loy Matthias bi'atzmei klal. Therefore, the zulus is not nira Matthias, even though he may be Matthias. He may have a certain Matthias al Pitora, but that's not available the marum klal who klal for who's, because his Reimamus is not Pefkinas Matthias. It's not in an Matthias Dover. It doesn't clash with Matthias. So that's the in Bekitza that we were learning before the so-called break. So ask yourself the shadow, what sort of a geder is that? How is it tried to say that there can be such a Enif and a Reimamus, a emes Reimamus, which is not between Matthias. So Dafki mitzad the fact that it's not Matthias, therefore it's Reimamus Amitias, and therefore we have to say that what do you say that Alpi Torah of Alpi emes, the spheres or the Kelim and Atzilis do have some sort of Matthias. I feel that Gavi this from we come to us. We have to say that he can even give them Matthias. Mitzad Goidel Malosai, he can even be Marshelehem Matthias because it doesn't have anything to him. Ayin is called Teufes. It's ain't a Teufes, it's like cloud. If I'm going to ask the Shala, what we should do is because the whole Enif and Reimamus, the Yachas Dichazach, I'm Marumam Legavi something. Or if I say Reimamus, I imply that there's something else, or that there are other inyonim which are not Marumam. If that's the case, every Reimamus is a form of a Matthias. As if it's a Matthias, then at least Badach is another Matthias. It must be. It's only a question of the degree of how much it's Maval. L'chera. And it's a dova. Ma'anim, was it this whole Geder? Was it the ganze, in this Reimamus? She'einu b'chinas Matthias, Reimamus Atzmi, and everything is bottled, but there's a bittel shova, mashvim, with the ganze do. But it seems to me that fact that the Rebbe brought in Yodea Yodua, he brought in the whole Enif and Bechira versus Yodea Lamaila. Well, that's of interest, and that's got a certain shaykhs to these inyonim. The in that tzich in Chelakei, which I don't necessarily challenge you to learn that tzich, it was a very hard tzich. In Chelakei, the whole Indian about towards the end, the whole page and a half or more about Yediyah versus Bechira, with footnotes as auch and with this auch and this is mamish piliplois. And the Rebbe deals with it in his amazing way, from all sorts of different, amazing angles and different viewing. However, what he brings to at the end is footnote right near the end of the whole Indian. Boy, the Rebbe says that what's the difference between Yadua v'Yodea, so these all these chiluchim that we make. And I think the implication is that the kasha is, can it really be any different than what's known in that Yadua? All right, so on the lower level, he chooses. Or Bipal is Yodea, I'm sorry, Bipal is Yadua, and he knows what's going to be. Can it be otherwise? I mean, it can't really be otherwise. It can't really be otherwise. It's below יש פה איזשהו עניין של, יש פה איזה גדר של עניין של הכרח. In other places, it's מבוא על קושיה מסוג זה, it's מבוא the עניין של נוירה עלילה על בני אדם. That's ain't nothing. The whole thing is a trick. The whole עניין של ידיעה versus בחירה. And so, of course, that's what the Rambam gets to in his famous statement. It's all in for the moon. You can't really know. In these, you have no musik. In the Eivisha, therefore, you have no musik bedaitoi or yediot. And the Ravid gets very angry, and everybody breaks and her. So this is the Nakuda. However, the Rebbe says over there that in the Rishonim it's brought a lotion that the Eivisha is he's a Matthias, but Bebilti Matthias Nimto. Or the Rambam uses the expression Amitas Himota'oi. Amitas Himota'oi. I mean, we see that the Rishonim are trying to hint at something. They're trying to say that the Eivish is an entity. He's there. Fahan is there. But he's not at all in the form of Matthias, how we understand Matthias Klau. I figure in the highest, or even that you'll be Matthias, angel Matthias, who built him Matthias Nimto. In other words, he's Nimto, or he's not Nimto. He's just a Matthias. And I remember this Pele was Einachanami, the Seichel can't really be Toivis, Amitis, Musik, Vahesbe, Nimto, Bebilti Matthias Nimto. And the Rebbe says that in Azar level where he's Bilti Matthias Nimto, the Oifen HaYediyah is also in that Oifen. In Mamere, Ein is a Kol Erech, a Kol Kesher, with the Inu from the Yediyah, Kamoishu. In Mamere, what you're talking about, the Akasha from Bechira, and the way you understand Bechira, feeling that level of which was already Yodea, but that's another Geda, but Ein is a Kol Shayla. You can't be Maksha Mizela Lazekla. Over, I mean, Ksokos, also Mashikosu. Bahabi Makimus Basilis. Over the Rebbe makes it even more Mudal that that's another oilam of Matthias Klal Uklal Klal. Lefi the Rambam, that's all I Kavanose. Yeah? If I am conscient to us, that's what the Rebbe's Kilo Matzayin did in one of the amazing Ha'oras. It's of course also the Kavanah from the Rambam Gamke. Ulai Yesh Lomar, that it's also the Inni from the Noira Lilo al Bnei Adam. Why can't I walk in Lahari Bezeh? The Regazeh? Allah upon him Lefi Zeh, kommt is het multi Matthias Nimto is moedel die hechlet door Gamre a veel van alle kusa it's got Ezeshu Sheiches el Oilamas a veel in as even that it's not yet Sheiches el Oilamas but it's kilo eventually going to be for the sake of the Oilamas a veel in Madrigas gewoes Beis or the immediate Indian from Elikus and immediate Atzmus is just completely and utterly another Indian altogether. And it follows that if we're going to say that the Reimamas is mitzadat matrega, there's not right to say that it's a Reimamas which feels itself, and it's a way of its being aware of its Reimamas, ain't a like somebody that he does feel his Reimamas. It's a Reimamas in the very etem, and that's what the Pshat calls it, Achmi. It's completely another Geda. And if everything is just bottled, but tatlets are beetle, but Matthias like Avizeh. And if Magbihi, Lashovis, Pili Lirois Bashamayim over or Davki because of that tremendous Magbi Lashavis, therefore the Infinite Proteus material makes sense. All the union makes sense. Because ain't it's like coal Bayab he's another getter altogether. He can just be wherever he likes around here, but ain't was a coal stira or toifas, it's like cloud or cloud. Das ist jetzt immer der Bio bezeh that you're talking about, and therefore the Rebbe was maramas bederach po alayim aderach k'mosomrim. The Rebbe was maramas alini from Yodea v'yeh you do. I mean, everybody's got some sort of a kidum that leads me further into the milim and into the pirush of the Indian Eishu who miskadem be'emshah. If we even to more dafki doses around here. Yeah. We're also going to see another dogma, and in the coming chapter, also we move in with a certain kilo inyan, is we have to say that these inyanim amakadem, the whole hasoge of pnimius, of what were, even though that in itself is not really the main issue. At Afar, now the Rebbe begins, Ayin in Lamayla in Reish Lamed Beis. I had to be a little bit married, first of all, to get us back on the track. Zweitens is to try and, be al-Chaponim Magdir, the Indian that we should know when we keep talking about Rei Masatzmi and all these, on what level, Beis even in Alakus are we talking? V'ayin in Lamayla, dehine abitul de tikun, beklal, hu abitul be'etzem hamatziyus. Shezehu inyan rach kakone v'kosheke erez. Now that's the Gemara in Masechta Tainis. But the Gemara says, Le'olam yehei adam rach kakone v'al yehei kosheke erez. That a man should always be soft like a weed. He should be flexible like a weed. He should be able to bend.
Reed, maybe.
Reed, I'm sorry, not weed. Yeah, reed, you're right. Yeah, 100%. Like a reed. And not kosher like a cedar tree. There's a cedar tree, kosher kasida is referring to toyu. The inifan tikun is rach kakona. And the inifan rach kakona means you can bend it any way you want. You can literally, it's nitan, the kol ifanim of natia, afichi, mahapachet and folded back to front, okay, because that's the Indian from Rachus be'etem amatziyus. The midas de toyu beklolos ein bechinas amatziyus. Or midas de tikun ein beklolos bechinas bittel amatziyus. They're the Indian from bittel in etem amatziyus. Now here we're going to meet up with this Indian what we just said before. They are amatziyus. And particularly we saw in the previous chapter that the kelim of Atzilus Alachera already an angel Matthias Kimat, Boifel Avona Pushuted in Matthias. What do you mean by saying that they're beetle, Be'etem Hamatthias, beetle Be'etem Hamatthias? So therefore he says, Ve'imi yesh bezeh madreges, Shahim Bechinas Hamatthias. A commotion is boiling of Perek Reish Lamed Aleph, that was the Perek we just finished. The gam midas the tikun heim befinnes Matthias do. Now he didn't say moichen so much, but midas upon him. He said they're already ayin from Matthias. And one of the inyonim is that they're a mocky after ayin from Ashpoah into Biyah. They're already beginning. The seder of the Ashpoah, it's going to go down into Biyah. And they're already on ayin from Matthias. Okay, my mishu, sorry, said mikol mocky. Beklolos ubechinas bitul be'etem. They're bottle be'etem, even though they're amatziyus. Now here's an interesting one. Ukemoi mishu beteva horach. Like a mensch that he's beteva horach. In other words, he's a softy. Not a softy in the unpleasant sense, but he's in the weak sense. But he's a very easy person to deal with, and he takes everything. You can how do you call it? Give him a bitush, and anything you like, and he'll just take it, and he just goes further. V'loi poga, v'loi noga. And my mother said that Rebbe, that's a very interesting sort of person. Who brings bittul b'shiflas b'etzem ha'matzias shalai. And he's very etzem ha'matzias. He's a shiflastic man. He's like exactly the hyper for looking for being teufus up to chashivas by people, or what to stuff himself by his way. But on the contrary, he's a son of it, but he can't take that, and all those sort of inyonim. So says the Rebbe, I mikol mokim, and so are we. Dimi yois, shu mikol mokim b'chinas matiyah. He said, sof kol sof, he's also a matiyah. You can't avoid it. If you've gone down past Atzilas and past the Kelim of Atzilas, or already into Biyah, then everything's a matiyah. You can't possibly say that he's not a matiyah. He is. Als een nivra en als een entity in Zehoilam is een Matthias. En maar mitzad dat, we shaykh boy aveda. Begin is bitla. He's also got to do his own particular aveda from bitl ayesh. Mikol mokim hu botel be etem. That's a very amazing idea. That's a very piladikazah. And it doesn't have one to do. It doesn't have one to do with the other. Biur is that this mensch, mitzad his hargosha of his bittul to elokus, and how much really the whole world is botel, his whole yachas to things which happen to him, and to things that occur, and things what people say, and the whole in the fact that there's another person in the world, ayachas to others, well, that doesn't cause him any, how do you call it, what you might call problem. It's not his materials, he just, as he will plain is, in other words, that the mensch is a bottle, the mensch, even though technically an alpi etzema ayachas to boire venira to elakus exhulamayla me'elamas ve'elakus exhulalamata umislavish and he's a material. Who material? Amamela mitzadat. If he were to read a Maimonides, an Avedic Maimonides, which attacks the innocent from the Yesh and Matthias and talks about Bittul with Matthias, then he also, if he's honest, he'll be able to find in himself that he's also a Matthias. But again, tell a coup. He said he's a bottle mensch, and his whole Indian is that he knows he's nothing, and his whole yachas to others, his whole yachas to the world around him is even for nothing. Says the Rebbe, das ist die Nakuda ad Sphiras Ayin Atzilas. Mitzad etzem minyonim legabi elakus l'mayla me'atzilas, and legabi elakus l'mayla me'atzimtzum, then there are Matzil, the Kelim of Atzilas, particularly the Chitonius are Kelim, are already a Gede, that have a shaykhs to Ashporia, they're already a Matzil. He said, however, their etzem hargosha biatzmom, and v'mela their etzem yachas one to the other, and the yachas to the etzem fact that they're a mashpia, is in an even for tachlis habitl. This is absolute bitl be'etzem ha. So here we have to understand that there's also a dachastik Hagdora here, we have to be magdir. When we say spheres in Tuyu, and we bring the whole mashal from Reimer, over there we say that each sphere is an initial Reimer. And then what the kasha is, why does that Reimer must disturb the other sphere? Over here where we're talking in Tikkun, we say that in Tikkun, Rach Kekona, Alte Kosher Keles, or this is even Rach Kekona, it's hard to say that we mean that each sphere in Tikkun is Reimamas Amitias. And therefore, if Bala is Reimamas Amitias, that the father is Bittul B'me Matthias. Ulai, אולי אפשר להעמיס את זה גם. אבל לכן הפשט is that in Atzilus, it's not shy the Indian from Reimamas, wie Paulus Atzilus is already Matthias. It's already shy into the Indian from Oilamas, which are Bepinas Matthias. It's not shy the Indian from Reimamas al derech harogil in them, because if it were, it would also be Nitfas Beishu Indian from Matthias, because they're already in the area from Matthias. Reimamas Atzmias is Begamri Lamala Mia Matthias. And therefore we have to say that the mila of Atzilus is that it's makabel, and it knows that its whole union is that it's a makabel from Rimam and Samiti. And that's the difference between Tuyu, Vatikin in a, how do you call it, in a, what you might say, B'derech Haggadah, how would you say it, in a homiletic way, in a homiletic way. Yeah, we could say that the difference is that in Tuyu, everybody's a macha. In Tuyu, the diun on Raimam is of Yedreina, of each one of them. In Tikkun, the diun on Raimam is how you makabel the Raimam's atzma. In other words, it's not that the spheres in Tikkun, each one of them is a Raimam. No, the whole union of Tikkun is that you're a makabel. And like we saw at the end of the previous moment, the Rebbe used an expression that Yeshus is a stira to Reimamas. That Yeshu Matthias ain't a kli el a Reimamas klal. That's what we had in the previous moment. Where does any sort of Yeshus, that's not a kli to Reimamas. Yeah? Even the Reimamas built the atzmi, avoided it. From a daiselo. Lefisa kommt is that Atzilus is the union from Bittel be'etzem, the meaning from these battlers, Amitius, here be'etzem Matthias. Imamela, it's a kli. Yeah, it is your kli to the union from Reimamas Amitius, and the Reimamas Amitius is only mitzad the union from the Mashpia, not mitzad the spheres, that's one. Kenya Shlema, ados of the beer. And therefore you can have both in your name. Yeah, you can have the mitzad echad mitzad der Mitius geder ha'eloki, then they are a Matthias, or mitzad Yediyosum v'haragushosim bi'atzmom. Yeah, who halten sie auf der Welt, to use the expression? Yeah, sie wissen, dass halten gar nicht. Und der Mann mishpotel, wo ein kol Matthias klar. Eidels was legabi, yeah, a Mitius a dargis in Elokut ha'yaref, was a Matthias. Zero seis chadlem. It's a very rich idea. And the first says that if it's not of Shatter and Amos, a bottle of Chosid, he's not there. He is. And it could be he's got his own little weeny problems here and there with his own, Yeshus Lagabi Amitius Elokus. Okay, Zayin in it. Zayin Nakudas. Yeah, so. How does he say in the famous passage there in Cholfu? Yeah, the Lagabi Amitius Atzmius, even avoid Amitius is also Lechet Yechoshev Chassid. That's another chesed. Of he said, in Beharagashose, or be Diosi, he's bottled with us. Without Kain Earth, Nishagabi in cloud. Therefore, he's able to be careful from the Roman Messiah. Atzmius. And not that it's different the diu and how it is in Toyu and how it is in Tikkun. In Toyu, everybody's that's the old expression. Oh, don't send the Elamachas. Over there they're all big Matthias and they're all clashing one with the in Tikkun and they call it Chassidim in Tikkun, Pitteldik Chassidim. They have their own little problems with the Matthias of a mitzad the Amitius Apitel, but Matthias Mamela Meir Behemin and a Reimamas Amitius. And therefore the Indian Aishkalus is Kimat Blimis Mispa. Yeah. And in Toyu everything's just kilo. Oh yes, we'll allow that also. In other words, it's one time round, it's brought down 10 from 10, Ishkalus Yedovins in Toyu. And I would say, oh yes, we can also allow in our, we can put in our our book, in our publication, in our advertisement book, we can say, we also got Ishkalus. You want this color? Over one time, around on what really is the whole work over there, how do you call it, the whole mahalach, is Herigish Harimas, who said Herigish Harimas? The very fact that he's just Ephes I get it from Matthias, it gets in the way. In Tikkun, Mitzad, the fact that they are beetle, Matthias, Amitias, therefore there can be Meir Bohem, but even Shal Kli, Mamish and Makabo, to the Amazorim. Therefore, or someone says that Rabbi Ach, however, Lafia Mavur, I must say that Ach bothers me slightly. I'd like to sort of be more clear in my mind. What should we do with Ach? Because Ach means like a sort of a slight turn, it's like a slight movement in another direction. Like we just said, that here we're talking about the Mekablim, we're not talking about the Mashpiyim, not about the Merumamim, we're talking about the Mekablim, the members of Merumamim. Now he goes back to Reimamas. He said, Lafia Mavua Khan, being in our Reimamas, you and Zeb Bechinas Ha'atzmas. We go up into the Inen, Ha'atzmas. In other words, in this little passage here, we weren't necessarily talking about that, but now we're going back to that. Shehu Bechinas Reimamas Atzmi Liyoisei Atzmi. In other words, it's Reimamas in Azasot Ta'ifan, that nothing has any error cloud due to the fact that he's Matthias, Bebilti Matthias Nimta. In other words, the word Atzmi refers to that, to another Geder of Matthias altogether, and that's the word Atzma. What the Inyan van Atzmas means, Etzem HaBoirei, what that's what the Rambam says, Amitis Himotoi, we have no musig, really, Viazoi, is that Ayin van Matthias, all we know that he's Nimta. That's the lesson in the Rishonim, which is Me'od Meduyak, Nimta B'Pchinas Bilti Matthias. Nimta. Amamile, V'harei, Ein B'zeh Inyan HaMatthias Klal Chaspe, in other words, Nimta is there, aber nicht mehr Matthias. Had he called fire and is there. And on the contrary, that's what's written over there in Pasha Vayero, in the Torah, the Atzmus is, I don't know, Hamoyer Vizgalit, he's everywhere, and there's no Shaykh in him, not Hilim, and not Killer, he's just everything and everywhere. But it's not a Init Matthias, Cholila. Omnom is a Begiluim, or that's Atzmus Mami, Etzem HaBoirei. Aber in the from Giluim, in other words, Oirois, which are Meir from the Atzmas, Zehu Ba'oyer, Shuvidas Gilu HaEtzem. He said that the Inyan from Reimamas Atzmi is also there in Giluim. It's also there in Giluim, aber it's in the Oyer, how he is, Bechinas Gilu HaEtzem, V'kolul Bi'atzmusai. In other words, not that it's Meir Michutz La'etzem, Pirush, our which is described in the Siddur as Meir Michutz La'etzem, in Yoni is Lahoyi La'ezemashu. Lahoyi to give its oil eventually to Hamshocha Ploinius Le'inyan Ploini. Ma'ashekin, what we say, Kolu Bi'atzmusei, and our oil which in Yoni is, purely Gilui HaEtzem. Remember, the two kilo go together. If it's Kolu Bi'amitius B'toich Atzmusei, then what do you call it there? B'toich Atzmusei, it's a form of a Gilui, but sometimes in some of our he calls that Echoilas. It's like, it's not that he's really Mamish Megale himself, but he has a way, Megale, the Inyan of, how do you call it, Kol Yochel, the Inyan from the Echoilas, Amitius. Well, that's already a Gilui of Adova HaKol. It's not the Etzem, but it's like a description or a Inen in the Etzem, Mitzad the Inen of the Etzem. So the Rebbe says that even there, where it's a Inen from Gilui already of the Etzem, Mitzad is being Kol in the Etzem, and it's not Mamish Shleimas, V'havdolas HaEtzem, nonetheless, he says, HaReimas Bezer, U'Bechinas Reimamas, it's also Reimamas. In other words, the Chiddush be that not just in Atzmusai, no, even in Gilui Mi'atzmus, Oria Ha'ora Mimenu is Bora, nonetheless it's also the same Reimamas. Now, of course, when we say the same, maybe Yesh was a Chilukim, come on, but it's still in that same gather of Mitzad the Bilti Matthias Nimtza with the whole readers. It's Reimam Atzmi. Ukemoi, HaMelech HaMareimam Livadoi. We say in Birchas Krishma that he's a Melech HaMareimam Livadoi. Meoz. In other words, primordial. So ask yourself to Shaila, how can it be a Melech if he's Merumam Legamre and he doesn't have anything on which to be a Melech? The whole inyan from a Melech is, that he's a Melech Alam. Ukemo, another dogma, Adoin Olam Asher Moloch Beterem Kol Yitzu Niv. Beterem Kol Yitzu Nivra. Before there was any form of a Yitzu Nivra, he was already, Moloch. Adoin Olam Asher, Moloch. The Rebbe was it does have as I'm in Sotinian that he's already Melech believe there being any gather whatsoever of a Yitzur or a Nivra. You can only be Melech of a subject. If there's not even any gather of subject, nobody's even talking about it. It was a Shaykh Devinifan for Moloch. So he said, Shehuin in Reimamas Atzmi. He said, Das is the for Reimamas Atzmi. In other words, that the inyan from Adoin Olam Asher Moloch is indicative that oyer which is already called betoicha etzem. In other words, it loy boy the etzem mamish, the etzem aboyroi, the etzem atzmi. Das is sicher that he's merumim in the way that we described before barichas. The chiddush here is that even in a gilui mimenu, but the inyan from gilui mimenu, sometimes we said the inyan yechoilis at this particular madriga was that's not yechoilis is not anything yet. It's what you could. It's not that anything has really happened. It's just that you could do that, or you have the capacity. The chiddush nifla b'zeh is that even though nothing actually happened, and maybe you could say, but Efshor is to say a thing like that. Maybe nothing would ever happen either. It's not mukrach mitzad the madrega that it's going to become a melech alam. Nonetheless, he said that since it's gone out of the etzem, it's already shot to talk about Ayin of ultimately there is going to be, even though madrega zu lo shayach al zeh, and mitzad the etzem level of that madrega could be there would never be. That's what the Rabbeinu Yehuda Levi, he wrote the Adon Elam. Well, that's what he's mashmil anu. That in that madrega, if it's already a oyer, even though it's a oyer dain kolo biatzmusay, there must be episa, some sort of a purpose, a kavona, a inyan in this that the oyer was mishkala. And therefore that's what in tachus and hadinus lishoini hanoirah, that's what he's maramas. Adoin olam, asher ma, because adoin olam also implies that he's an adon over the inyan. He said in shoyrish, that's an inyan from beterem kol you. Before there was even any shaykhs, even any necessity to say that there will be the inyan Nivroim, but nonetheless there was a ha'ora, but that can already be called mola because sof epis for the rest of them. Sof mashu. But in that particular madrega, this is mitzad the reimamas atzmiyas. What's the inyan from reimamas atzmiyas? Mitzad echad, reimamas atzmiyas is the, like we said before, the abdullah of the atzmiyas, legamre, and mitzad hasheni, it's already shayach on this level upon him to say that it's somehow azus who shoyres what's eventually going to be the inyan amaluk. The chiddush is on that level. Aim was a kol echrayach. And therefore he says, but terem kol yitzu nivra and moloch nonetheless go together. Even though they are still, but this is the miyushu v'ayin. So now comes on the Rebbe in the brackets, and here we're going to meet up with a periodic zach. And that is that berega what you've gone out of the atzmas, and berega what you said you ain't talking about a gilui, mea atzmas, then l'chora you're moving into some sort of a world where you're going to have to, you say molo. You mean that ultimately this is going to be, or it's not. It is, and all these sort of almost like contradictory, and paradoxical statements. Im Kain says the Rebbe, berega what you say that. In other words, the beer is that of etzem atzmusei mamish, maybe you wouldn't say a terem koyit, moloch terem koyit. It's not shy. And once you've got into this whole Ayin, says the Rebbe, Im Kain, then you must have interrelated madregas. We could say that the Maila here is not the Maila Achmiyas of just built-in Matthias Nimtza and that everything is bottled, but there's a beetle mitzad the Havdalah of the Achmas. Maybe you could say that that's the Maila of that Achmas. In other words, it's like, and we said before that Malucha can be mitzad the from Maila, but only on a much lower level. Of a mitzad the Etzem, he's multu b'tachas Havdalah be'etzem atzmusei, not mitzad ma'alosei. If you say mitzad ma'alosei, then maybe you can even fall into matziyah. So now the Rebbe is going to say, l'chora, once you get out of the atzmas and you use an expression like b'terem kol netzu nirah, but nonetheless moloch, then l'chora you're saying that level's got a mila l'gabe other levels. You're already getting into this whole concept of the Ayin and l'chora. We're not trying to say that. So the Rebbe says, Ein achanami, aber ein daiger. So, even though it is a mila, or that mila is a mila achmiyas, in other words, it's a mila with yesh bezim remimus achmiyas, even though it's a mila. In other words, that it's the Rebbe sort of he feels the kasha, but the ordinary reader might not have even felt the kasha. But the Rebbe feels the kasha, and to a certain extent he finishes on a note where he has his cake and he eats it kaviyach as well. In other words, the einachanami over mitzad hasheni. It's so part of the Gilui and the Kolol, betoicha atzmins. So it's so part of Gilui atzmins. It hasn't told the meaning for Raymond's. So we'll just read that quick and that'll be enough for this evening, and then we'll see as go along. He said, V'yesh lema de bazeh shayach inin reimamas hamayla. Da ha-reimamas shili yoshe atzmi, ha-re'enu shayach bazeh mayla. Like we said earlier, lema shehu gavoya b'ma'alosai. We can't say that. Meyacha, shehu atzmi. Bilti matzias nimta. Ha-rizeh l'mayla megeh de inin ha-ilui. That's not shayach to any Maila or Ilui, like we pointed out about Baris at the beginning, earlier. V'areimamas shemitzadi yoseh gilu ha'etzem, v'kolo ba'etzem. He said, b'zeh shayach inin ha'ilui, shemerumam b'ma'alosei. That oya is merumam b'ma'alosei. So you might say, well, who said? Maybe because it's kol in the atzmas. Maybe it's not merumam mitzadi Maila, no. Balas is so close to the Atzmas, it's got all the Inyan of the Atzmas. So therefore it brings the Rebbe a periodic raya from the famous piece there in Perek Gimel in Shara Yichud, and also in Perek Lamed Gimel in Tanya. There's also a Zayah Mashmois, that there's the Oya how it's Kolo B'toich HaMoya HaShemesh, and it's Korev El HaShemesh, but he says over there that Oya is a Maila over there, which is Me'el La'oretz L'Dorim L'Dorim Aleya. And Mamela said the Rebbe from that mashma that in that which is Mamish Kolu Bi'atzmusei, there's a Maila L'Gavi the which is already Me'er Beis or even B'toich HaCholol, and that's the famous Kal V'Chema over there. He said Ima Yochel L'Hoye Aga Oretz V'L'Dorim Koshkein Shehu Yochel L'Hoye Bimkoimei, so the Rebbe's medayik was didn't even koshkein to say the zichat must be there. If it's out here, then it must be there. Wasn't the koshkein with kol v'chema? That oil it's called, but it's another gather of oil to together. Is a simon that they say, the fact you say it's another gather of her, and it's another Ayin legavi the which is meir, but Chol Olam, and Chol Olam is a simon that it does have a mile. If it's got a mile, then it's not the immediate sin of Remusa Achmiyas. He says, yes, I agree, but nonetheless it's still Remusa. Yeah, so Mirz Hashem, in the coming class we'll see what we can do with that one, but derech Yishuv b'prati is. K'may shkosav b'sefer shel beinim b'mashal ziv hashemesh, k'may shehu b'guf kadur hashemesh, shehu shom b'yesa seis b'yesa oz. Dahainu she'ayah shom b'ribui b'yesa, not only b'ribui, but b'oifen nailiyat. Ribui is just the fact that he says that it's up there, and kol b'teicha is not meir. But what he says that kal v'chayim v'kolshkei v'kal v'chayim she'ochel. Yeah, that makes it a naila harbi. And well, you have to say that it's a naila. Legabi what? Legabi the which is only meir also shredded to the inner oilemus. It is a simon you are talking about if it's a reimum mitzad maila. Aber gam ze hu reimum mitzad me. He said, "Ein nachanami is tacher ze." Ja, hainu shehu marumim be'etzim mohusei. Ve'ena b'chinas metzias be'atzmei. Yeah, he said, "Kemoi ha'etzim." Just like the etzim is ena metzias be'atzmei. Yeah, so it is there. Wish they toslecher over there in Tanya. If you just finish the way we finished, then you've got a real, as it were, stira. No, he said, you see, the Alter Rebbe agrees with me. The Alter Rebbe says over there, look over there carefully. And he said that even though it is. It's an Vaziv. And it's Koshkem v'Kal that it's Vaziv. And he said, ain't no Ela b'Shem Klau. You're assuming that it's both things. On the one hand, it is Vaziv. On the other hand, oh, no, it's not. Yeah, as far as Atzmas is concerned, it's got all the, as it were, all the pomp of the Atzmas. The Chayva is a simon from them Russian that you can have both. You can have a thing which is Mila, but that Mila is so immense, and that Mila is so profound that it gets into and remains in Reimum Atzmiyos. Thank you, my gentlemen. Have a good evening. Does it Ayin from a river? Yes. That's Ayin from a river. Reimum Atzmiyos, no matter what. Yeah, he might even look to you as if he's talking of das red Reimum Atzmiyos. Yeah, it's Gilui, but it's got all the Eino Elo B'Shem Gilui. This is how to use the expression. Gist Chareis Atzmiyos. Gist Chareis Atzmiyos. And that's the Indian what the Rebbe said on Rosh Chodesh Kislev. Holding out Rosh Chodesh, nobody said anything about Rosh Chodesh Kislev for the time being. We're holding Rosh Chodesh Kislev. What did the Rebbe say of Rosh Chodesh Kislev? Toshin Nun, when was it? The famous Sikha. He said that the Etzem Achayas has to be in the Etzem Achayas. He said it's even higher than Chay Be'etzem. Chay Be'etzem is just a Gilul. He said even higher than Yechida. Notice the Etzem. Yeah, the Etzem Chai, the Etzem Achiza, the goof in the Nisham. We had that lesson earlier in Ayin Beis. And that's what you gotta show we want Moshiach now. In them level, that's what you gotta say. Yeah, and then he goes on to say, the whole in the Atzmas and the whole in the Atzmas on the Shoma and again. Yes, Lema doesn't the Kesher, doesn't the Shaykhs. All of these inyanim all come together. But if you get up in that level, then you've got to go to Shlema Belisov. It's just going to pour itself down. Bo'eshpeich. What does the Atman say? Bo'eshpeich es ruchi al kol basar. Stam ruchi, he said in some of them, in Chanukah, not far from Chanukah. The Rebbe said, Ruchi is Ohecha Madroya. We are talking about Nefesh Ruach, Neshama, and Ruchi, but Stam Ruach, Skor of Ohecha. Avi, in Avi Gufa, Pnim is Agan Tzalicha, taught in some of them. Eshpech is Ruchi. Al Kol Basar. usual time. We're all sitting around the old row from Matte, and all sort of slapping hin and her. Oh, usual time. Je staat verder, de kilo. Het moet verder, de ene van Moshe. It can't go on this way. Gewoon niets te zeggen. Ja, de Matte is goeielig. We Korea, met regga al regga. En zo, maar we said, we want Moshe now. We something to even take of me out. Eindelijk harig we dwarim ha, tairim, only to talk about dwarim chiyuvim. And dwarim chiyuvim is that I've come to the conclusion, maybe I'm just sort of old-fashioned, if I suppose. I probably am. But I've come to the conclusion that the world of the media and the world of all the politicians and even the presidents of Medinas and all that sort of thing, even though they get elected by people, they don't really represent what is really happening in the world anymore. And the news and the whole media and everything, it's just one huge chipus after bluff. You know, it's just. I remember when I used to work in the old days, way back when I was in Australia. I worked in a newspaper. I worked for a bit of time in a newspaper. A story, you know, this whole internet, everybody's looking for a story. That's the whole thing. If you found a story, you're a brilliant journalist. You're how do you call it? A MarChesvan. What's a story? A story is a sipper. Remember the whole way they present the world is a sipper. A sipper. And the whole way they act is unreal. And you talk with people, you meet people, and you just talk with them. Yeah, I'm not talking about, in the underworld or something. You meet them so-called, nice people, and what it calls normal people, man in the street, that type of stuff. You meet people, and you talk with them, you get a very interesting reaction. Yidden, nish Yidden, And it's amazing. I was in a little village in England. I walked into a shop. Next thing a lady comes up and she says that she's into meditation. A little Goyish lady, she comes, she's into meditation. And she's into thinking about Hashem and everything. And she believes that everything is with the Jewish people. I she's mitten nowhere, way up in North Yorkshire somewhere. I don't know if she even sees it yet. And she sees me in this other year walking into the shop. It was by her, I'm waiting to you put up Sayyid. She comes running over and she starts telling us the whole thing. And she asked me about the Shisha Ketovit, the 6 dimensions. What do you say about them, Rabbi? So I start telling her about the Hashem Agdula, unification of Midas, Sheish Midas Lamadas, the Shores and the Shisha Ketovit, She was boggle-eyed. But then she said she wants literature. You said you Jews have to send me literature once a week. I mean, what is going on around here? And even better than that, I was in a shop, a big shop. I gotta go. So I gotta go across to. Is anybody going in the direction of anywhere? Anybody have a car here? No. Small group, so I didn't know the other car. So anyway, it's I have to go off it, so I have to go. But the good is that I come into a shop and it's a big shop and it's like a big department store. So you buy something, you go to the guys who there's a line and they're all wrapping in this, and then they take on the things they take the money, or they take your credit card or whatever. Nowadays people usually don't pay with money anymore. I paid with money, I don't know. So I get up to this line, and this little Goyish fellow, and it's a town way out of nowhere, So I said to this little Goyish fellow, and he gave me my packet, and I paid him. I said to him, you must make sure to do a good deed. You have to do good deeds and bring the world to a better place. I said, I feel you bring the world to realization. You have to be careful. You say Moshe, they sometimes get a bit move over with it, isn't it? So all of a sudden he looks at me and he says, "What?" He didn't say, he couldn't believe that I'm saying things like this to him. So I repeated it again very quickly, because people were waiting in the line, And I said to him, and he said, "Oh, yes." He said, "Yes." And then he said, "Yes." He couldn't figure what the heck I was saying. And gradually it sort of sunk into him, It stayed into him. He sort of get the idea. He thought I was complaining or something like that. he didn't believe that I was telling him a thing like that. So it gradually sunk in. So we just walked past it. There's about 3 other guys that are standing there. And we walked past him. The last guy heard me say this to him. And he says to me, "Yeah." He said, "For example, you should give a bit of tzedukah." I said, Yes, I swing around, I look at this guy, and he had a Jewish looking face, He had a little fellow, he was a guy for sure, but this fellow, So all of a sudden, here were all these people standing around. He had a big pack line of people waiting for him. So I thought if I say to him, "Are you Jewish?" it might embarrass him. He might want people to know that he's Jewish. As Hashem Almighty, So I didn't want to say to him, "Are you Jewish?" I said to him, "Do you speak in Hebrew?" So I forget. I jabbered something at him that would make him realize that I'm asking him if he's Jewish. So he looks at me and he sort of nods. He said, "But I don't understand Hebrew." But he nodded his head. You understand? So what do you say to that? Way out in the middle of nowhere. He heard me say to this little boy that you should do something good. And he said, "Oh yes, for example, I'll give him a little tzedukah." What do you say to that? Way out in the middle of nowhere.
He must be the only Jew in that whole village.
Yeah.
Maybe he's the only Jew in this whole village.
Yeah. It's a town, it's not just a village. It's a town. It's got a big department store. Come to Islam, he said that you can never tell what you have to just say something nice to somebody, doesn't matter what, you touch off something. Immediately, I said something to the little Goysha fellow, at the beginning he didn't get it, then he got it, and he said, "Oh yeah." He was pleased that I'd said something nice to him. He never hears anything like that from a customer, never hears that. So he was pleased, and then all of a sudden, it touched off a spark in some guy, all of a sudden he said, "Oh yeah, let him give stock." I said, I bet you when he went home, he gave a bit of stock. I bet you he did. Because he said that's what it means, they give a bit of stock. So you want to tell me that the world's not, something's going on out there. At least that's what I think. And I have a few other rides, but I have to go now. I can't bring any more rides. So have a good evening. I've got to run because I've got to get to Tuya's place about something.